I said, this is just a streaming test. So okay, I have to do a bit of juggling here because Windows OBS wouldn't capture the shader for the life of it, or the screen, so I had to capture Windows. So we had the pipeline, which is basically use these two shaders. Then we have, I cannot make this bigger, sorry. Then we have a set uniform float. So this basically says for the fragment shader, which is active, look for the uniform I time and reference $time. And if you look down here, here's a variable that's called time. And it goes currently from 30 to 32. There's a small glitch at the end when it wraps around, but basically that says every frame set the uniform I time to the current value of the variable. And then we have the aspect here. And this is currently a fragment shader, I aspect, and set this to 1.0. So we could set this to 2, for example, or to 3 or to 10. And then you see it gets squished. Or we could set it to 4.1, or that's probably too much. So it gets stretched. But the important part to see here is it works. There's no more wrapping artifacts. And obviously we'll use the correct aspect ratio for this screen, which is probably 0.6 in this case, to make the background real nice and perfectly aligned. Then we have the offset here. So we have again use the fragment shader because it needs to know which shader. Use the offset uniform, and then we have a sync offset here, which is a function that looks into the timeline code, and the timeline is here. We'll look into that in a minute. Then we have basically two textures. Ignore this that we're using frame buffer targets here. This system can load textures, but unfortunately only one channel. So we do a bit of trick here, and this basically renders the background texture into the frame buffer target background, and this renders the gradient texture into the gradient target. And then this here just says, okay, don't use a texture, use a frame buffer target, the one we call background, and use it as texture. Use the attachment index 0 and pass it through texture sampler 0. And then same here, the gradient, use the gradient frame buffer, use attachment 0, and then render it into, pass it through channel 1. And then we actually say, okay, textures, take the uniform sampler, take the uniform texture sampler and call texture sampler and use channel 0, and then for the gradient use channel 1, and then just render full screen quad, and that's it. And you can just stop the rendering here or keep it running. So let's keep it running, and we could move stuff around here and add more stuff here, but that's probably too much for today. It's a very quick way to clicking this together when you know what to do is like 3 minutes, and you don't have to do any coding. So quickly testing stuff. This is a pretty decent tool. And then you see we have the console here, and all our arrows are here, but now it's only file changes, so that's pretty cool. And then we have this timeline, and ignore the fact, what was a shortcut? Okay, so ignore these others here, but basically this is our current time, and I can scrub. So if you look here, the time changes with the scrubbing, which is pretty nice to say, hey, what's going on here. And then you saw the synchronized offset here, which basically does wherever my current, let me stop this here, wherever my current time is, check for the offset column and take the current value of that. So let's look at properties. So wait a second. Oh, this is a property and the channels are not highlighted yet, but basically this says, okay, at this point in time, which is at 0, 0, the UI needs revamping. At 0, 0, set the offset to 0, and then I scroll down with my mouse wheel and say, at this time, which happens to be 25.7 seconds in, it should be zero point 0.8, and then here it's 36 seconds actually. B1 and interpolate means don't do sharp cuts, but interpolate between these two values. So somewhere in the middle here, this value will be 0.9, and down here it will be all the way to the bottom. So that, let me show you. This is the text. So this is a gradient texture we used. So all the way to the bottom means this turquoise color. Then we have the zero point 0.9 here, which is roughly the black area. Then we have the zero point 0.8, which is probably around this edge. And if I scroll up here, then around about here, we have fully faded in at about 20%. And then here we have the fade in from the top. So I can let this run. If I right click, I can set a range that it will just loop through over and over. This is for debugging, for example. Hey, how is this transition looking? Is this really good? So let's disable this. So and you can see there are much more channels. This is copied from another project, so we can set the camera beam parameters, exposure, and the background color, which scene, the gamma, some camera settings, and stuff like that. So it's pretty fast to tweak values. So for example, let's just focus on this and just do this fade in again. I can say, okay, I don't like this value, so let's set it to 0.8, and then it will fade in a different direction, and I can tweak things super fast on, which is pretty nifty. And then I can just unfortunately the dialogues here have a render on a problem, but I can save it, and I can actually, I look into the package the next time, because I could press package now, and let me just do that. And so it packages this together, and I can't show you the Explorer window right now, but it created a file called 64.serial, and this is currently 515 kilobytes. And out of that, the background PNG actually is 507 kilobytes, and the other data is and the gradient is 6 kilobytes. So it's super compressed, and it compresses even better. And I could just load this into the Rust tool I wrote to replay it for, hey, set an art as a demo. So he just double clicks the serial file and can check it out. And we have a screen saver generator for that. So pretty cool tool to do some quick development. It's still a bit buggy, and there's like little glitches and stuff, but I can preview my textures, and we actually also use this to develop more complex shaders that have more than one texture, and you can see the render targets and stuff. You can see the animated values here. You see, well, arrows here are not. Let's look into the arrows for a second. So if I intentionally put an arrow here, then obviously the rendering will not work, but it will throw an arrow here. And this might be a bit hard to read, so we do you want the fragment shader. So we have this preview window where we can see, okay, this is the shader is I loaded it, and we have support for macros and includes. So this is the expanded version. So if you just have 5 includes in your file, this will be the expanded version. And actually here's the arrow, and here's the list of arrows again. So line 19, we have an error. Actually, we see the error is in the line above, because there's an syntax error, unexpected, blah, and it's because the code, the oh, nice. Okay, let's just do this again, because I didn't realize. So I'll fix this error again. So this is working again. And then I'll switch you to the other view and put in broken code. And you see it immediately stops because it can't compile a shader, and then highlights you have an error here, but you can also click here on the compiled fragment shader, and this shows you the text that the shader compiler actually sees after the pre-processing. And then it says, hey, this red line there's broken shader code here, and might be a bit misleading because this line here is actually broken, but it's close enough to find the problem. And if I just fix the problem now, and actually I have to reload this now, so you see it's working. It's a nice little tool we use for tech demos mostly. So yeah, little 20-minute session. I have no idea about the audio quality because I cannot hear you. I have no idea if the visual quality was good enough. I have no idea about the bandwidth usage because I'm in the marina now, and we share the Wi-Fi with all the neighbors and stuff. So I'll have a look into the stream afterwards and see if it works. I did a excuse me, high quality capture of this, so I'll upload this whenever I get to the point where I can upload again. But this solved our fish background problem, and I'm actually gonna do this when I'm back at my workplace next week. So probably the Wednesday evening session will be, if I can make Wednesday evening, it's probably gonna be Friday evening because I'm flying in that day. Friday evening session, we will translate this shader to the fish shader style, which is slightly different, pretty close, but slightly different. And we have to pass through uniforms and stuff, but this should fix the background problem for good because we don't shift quads roughly where we believe the screen is. We just calculate the screen corners and just render the correct texture there, and then offset it with shader magic. And probably the speed of the background, you'll see if you want a parallax effect or not, but pretty straightforward. So hope to see you soon. Hope this wasn't too annoying for you. Sorry for the low quality. We're getting there. See you soon. Ciao.